We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, Malma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. First, limited face-to-face classes will be allowed in January 2021 or the third quarter of the school year, according to Malacanang. In a televised media briefing, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said some private schools have already started with the limited face-to-face classes in June and that they will be allowed to continue. He also said the decision to allow limited localized face-to-face classes will be made with due coordination between DepEd, the Department of Education, and the local government unit concerned, plus local health authorities. Let's listen in.
Una, pinapayagan ang face-to-face classes sa mga low-risk areas o sa mga lugar na at least nasa ilalim ng MGCQ o yung mga nasa transition phase po ng MGCQ at New Normal. Pangalawa, ang face-to-face classes ay pinapayagan simula sa Enero ng susunod na taon o sa third quarter po of the school year. Pinayagan magpatuloy ang mga private schools na magsimula na po ng limited face-to-face classes noong Hunyo. Pangatlo, ang desisyon na payagan ng limited localized face-to-face classes ay dapat na may koordinasyon sa pagitan po ng DepEd, lokal na pamahalaan at local health authorities. Pang-apat at panghuli, mahigpit na pagsunod po sa health standards. Panglima, kinakailangan po magkaroon ng pilot testing at inspeksyon kasama ang National Task Force Against COVID-19 sa pagsunod ng mga required health standards.
Meanwhile, in her presentation, Education Secretary Leonor Briones reiterated that only local government units and schools classified by the Interagency Task Force as low risk will be allowed to implement limited face-to-face classes. Briones also stressed that schools that will be allowed to conduct limited face-to-face classes must comply with the requirements set by the IATF. And these include no mask, no entry policy in school premises, hand washing and hand hygiene, regular disinfection in school premises, checking for temperature and respiratory symptoms, and reduction of class size to 15 to 20 maximum and physical arrangement of seats conforming to required distances. The other health standards that must be observed include intermittent attendance to school only to complement distance learning, control of the flow of learners and personnel in entrance and exit, no mass gatherings, visible instructions, signage, and markings, and preparedness and care management system in coordination with LGUs and local health for contact tracing, testing, isolation, and treatment. And Vietnam received its first coal shipment from the U.S. Let's find out what this means. Ralph Wandolph, Empire, reports.
Vietnam has imported the first shipment of coal from the United States. State-owned coal miner Vinacom said on Wednesday, days after the two nations marked the 25th anniversary since they established diplomatic relations. The 21,700 tons of coal bought from IMI Fuels LLC arrived at a port in northern Vietnam. Vinacom, formerly known as Vietnam National Coal Mineral Industries Corporation, said in a statement on its website. The Southeast Asian country, which has become more reliant on imported coals for power generation in recent years, said this week its imports of the fuel surged by more than 50% in the first half of 2020 from a year earlier to reach a record high. Most of the coal imported in the January to June period came from Indonesia and Australia. I quote in a statement, "The delivery of the first coal shipment will pave the way for more coal imports from the United States in the future," unquote. Vinacom said, saying the second batch was scheduled to arrive in September. Vietnam has been seeking to import more U.S. goods, including coal and liquefied natural gas, or LNGO, to help narrow a trade gap after President Donald Trump threatened tariffs on its products amid the Chinese-U.S. trade war. Vietnam's trade surplus with the United States, Vietnam's largest export market, widened to $24 billion in the first half of this year from $20 billion a year earlier, according to Vietnam's customs data. This is Ralph Wandel M5 bringing you the latest updates here in Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Ralph. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, more than 100 people plus students were quarantined after it was confirmed that they had close links with a physics teacher who tested positive for COVID-19. Joining us live from Sri Lanka is Vanessa Viloria. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Alma. Here's the latest update here in Sri Lanka. At least 152 people, including students, had been subjected to quarantine after they are alleged to have maintained close links with the physics teacher of a semi-government school at Gampaha yesterday. Gampaha medical officer of health said. He told that the teacher has tested positive for COVID-19 on Sunday, July 19, and had caught the virus from his brother-in-law who had driven the vehicle in which a counselor had traveled to the rehabilitation center in Kandakadu. 52 people, including the staff members and students of the school, and another 100 students of tuition classes were subjected to PCR tests. According to the reports, none of them have tested positive for the virus, Dr. Subasinghe said. He added that they would continue to conduct more PCR tests on the contact who had tested negative. And another update, Alma, the government has announced an immediate ban on the repatriation of human remains to the country as a precaution against the pestering COVID-19 pandemic, a topmost official said. The ban came into effect from 12 midnight on July 14, and no date has so far been announced as to when it will be relaxed or lifted totally. The ban applies to all human remains, irrespective of the cause of death, since it is feared that the bodies could have been exposed to the pandemic at the time of movement from one facility to another, such as residence and hospitals. However, the ban excludes human ashes that will be allowed to be brought into the country in keeping the proper health guidelines. The exact figure of Sri Lankan human remains that are set for repatriation to the country could not be determined, but at least 46 COVID-19 deaths have been reported in the West Asia region, official with the Sri Lankan Bureau of Foreign Employment said. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for your updates there in Sri Lanka. Looking forward for more updates in Sri Lanka. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alma. Reporting live from Sri Lanka, this is Vanessa Viloria Silva, and we live in interesting times.
Now, police in Malaysia will take stern action immediately against violators of the RMCO, or the Recovery Movement Control Order. That and more news from Kuala Lumpur. Joining us live is Gail Aldos. Hello, Gail.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Here's the latest news in Malaysia. Firm action will be taken for flouting the RMCO. No more warnings and advice will be given. Instead, the police will immediately take stern action against those who violate the Recovery Movement Control Order. Senior Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said this was following the increasing defiance of the standard operation procedure in the communities, presuming the movement control order was over and no legal action would be taken against them. Earlier yesterday, Ismail said police had detained 80 individuals for flouting the RMCO, and of the total, 20 were remanded and 4 were given bail, while 56 individuals were compounded. He said among the offenses in defiance of the MCO included activities in pubs or nightclubs with 37 offenses, and activities involving the presence of crowds which made social distancing difficult, which is 43 offenses. He told a media conference yesterday that nightclubs and entertainment centers are still in the negative list. The government, through the Housing and Local Government Ministry and local authorities, will boost monitoring and enforcing on nightclubs and entertainment centers operating during RMCO. He added this includes suspending business licenses. The RMCO Compliance Operation Task Force will ratchet up inspections and take action on premises owners and members of the public who do not comply with the stipulated RMCO standard operation procedure. In addition, Ismail said there were numerous reports from the police and RMCO Compliance Operation Task Force against food premises which flouted RMCO, including social distancing by the customers. Subsequently, he urged every food premises owner to pay attention and comply with the SOPs set if they do not want to face stringent action. He also said the government hopes the people will continue to be the eyes and ears of the authorities to report any action which flouts the SOP. On other developments, Ismail said police had detained 14 foreign nationals in the Operasi Benteng roadblocks over immigration offenses 2 days ago. The government will take firm action against any quarter who attempts to enter the nation's border illegally and would not compromise against those who were involved in smuggling in illegal immigrants, he added. In another news, Alma, SOP compliance are important for those under mandatory quarantine. Infection and transmission of COVID-19 can occur if those undergoing the 14-day mandatory quarantine, either at home or at quarantine stations, do not adhere to the prescribed standard operating procedures, said Health Director General Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah. As such, he said it was important for everybody, especially those undergoing the mandatory quarantine, to comply with all stipulated SOPs and regulations. He told a media conference on COVID-19 yesterday that the issue is not complying with the SOP. Those under quarantine at home should not mix with family members in the house. If the person is positive, the person will infect the family members. He added that even if they place them at quarantine stations, but if they do not adhere to the SOP, they may also be infected if there are positive cases among them. Compliance with SOP is important. Dr. Noor Hisham said the Ministry of Health would continue to work with the Royal Malaysia Police to ensure those under quarantine at home adhere to the prescribed SOP. On the number of individuals who underwent mandatory quarantine at home being tracked down by the police for refusing to undergo the second swab test, he said there were 63 people. On the government's decision to reinforce the 14-day mandatory quarantine at quarantine stations beginning this Friday, Dr. Noor Hisham said it did not apply to those who were under quarantine at home. He added that the order for mandatory quarantine at quarantine stations only applies to those returning from abroad starting this Friday. It was announced yesterday that all those arriving from abroad, whether they are foreigners or Malaysians, will be required to undergo the 14-day mandatory quarantine at quarantine stations, not homes, beginning July 24. In other developments, Dr. Noor Hisham said anyone who breached the regulations on the mandatory quarantine, such as leaving their home and cutting or removing the quarantine wristband before the end of the quarantine period, will not escape legal action. He mentioned there was a case in Johor where the person who was under quarantine at home was not at home when the MOH officers went to check. The person will be arrested and taken to court for further action. He added those who remove the quarantine wristband before the quarantine period ends will be fined when they go to the health clinic because they are expected to have the wristband on when they meet the health officers. 2 days ago, 2 cases of COVID-19 person under surveillance were viral, one of a woman wearing the quarantine wristband enjoying a meal at a restaurant, and another on a quarantine wristband found at the arrival hall of the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Back to you, Alma.
Right, thank you, Gail, for your updates there. Thank you, EBC Kuala Lumpur Bureau.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This is Gail Aldos. We live in interesting times.
All right, let's go now to Vietnam, where no new airlines will be approved until 2022. Plus, the East Sea dispute were discussed by Vietnam and China at the 12th meeting of the Steering Committee for Bilateral Cooperation. Let's hear the developments from Eliana Faith Sebastian. Hello, Eliana.
Hi, Alma.
Hello, Eliana. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Alma. Here are the latest updates here in Vietnam. No new airlines will be allowed to open in Vietnam until 2022 at the earliest, Deputy Prime Minister Trinh Dinh Duong has announced. The Deputy Prime Minister said until the aviation industry has fully recovered from the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, no new airlines will be considered. His ruling conforms proposals submitted by the Ministry of Transport or the MOT in May. The announcement will come as a blow to a number of new airlines that were hoping to take to the skies soon. Kite Air of Hospitality Group, Tianmin, and Vietstar Airlines of Vietstar Airlines Multi-Role Corporation were racing for permits. With the ministry's decision, these airlines must continue to wait for permits. Ministry of Transport Nguyen Van Thes said, in the most optimistic scenario, only in 2022 the local aviation market could reach the result it did in 2019. According to the ministry, Vietnam has 214 aircraft, but right now less than half are being used. To ensure the state management of aviation to develop sustainably in the future, the MOT suggested focusing on restoring the domestic air travel and solve the difficulties for the local airlines. According to the government office, Dung assigned the MOT to take responsibility in ensuring the sustainable development of the aviation industry. He also assigned the Ministry of Planning and Investment with the function of appraising investment policy of the Kite Air project to report to the Prime Minister in the future. Another update, Alma. Vietnam and China frankly discussed on recent situation and differences in the East Sea during the 12th meeting of the Steering Committee for Bilateral Cooperation via teleconference on Tuesday. The event was co-chaired by Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh and Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Expressing concerns over the recent complicated developments in the East Sea, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Min urged the sides to well control maritime differences, take no actions that may further complicate the situation or expand disputes, respect for Vietnam's legitimate rights and interests, and maintain peace and stability in the East Sea. Both sides agreed to stick to the common perceptions reached by their leaders as well as the agreement on basic principles guiding the settlement of sea-related issues signed between the two countries and comply with international law, especially the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea or the UNCLOS. The sides also agreed to accelerate mechanisms on sea-related matters to achieve practical outcomes, fully and effectively implement the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the East Sea or the DOC, and foster talks on a substantial code of conduct in the East Sea or the COC. Back to you, Alma.
All right. So, Vietnam's China has territorial disputes with Brunei, Malaysia. As we know, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam over the South China Sea. With Vietnam is the East Sea. And last week, as we know, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also rejected China's claims to most of the disputed sea and saying this is unlawful. What is Vietnam's stand on this?
Vietnam's foreign ministry's Leti Tu Hang had earlier said that Vietnam's consistent view is that the 1982 UNCLOS sets out the legal framework within which all activities in the oceans and seas must be carried out, and it welcomes all country stances that align with this view. So during the 12th meeting of the Steering Committee for Vietnam-China Bilateral Cooperation, held virtually on Tuesday, Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Pham Binh Minh had expressed concerns over the recent complicated developments over the South China Sea, known in Vietnam as the East Sea, with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi. So the two countries agreed to effectively and fully implement the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, or the DOC, in its entirety, and step up efforts towards an early conclusion of an effective and substantive code of conduct in the South China Sea, or the COC. Also, they agreed to abide by the agreement on basic principles guiding the settlement of the maritime issues between Vietnam and China to comply fully with the international law, especially with the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or the UNCLOS. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Eliana, for your updates there in Vietnam. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, Alma, reporting live from Da Nang, Vietnam. This is Aliana Faith Sebastian. We live in interesting times.
Okay, let's head on over to Cambodia, where the banana exports have dropped because of the pandemic. Meldy Mahinay joins us live from Cambodia. Hello, Meldy.
Hi, Alma.
Hi. Go ahead, Meldy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Here's the latest update in Cambodia. Cambodia's exports of Cambodia's export of yellow bananas experienced a slight decline during the first half of this year, compared with the corresponding period last year due to the coronavirus pandemic, which is affecting the global supply and demand. A Ministry of Commerce report said yesterday, Cambodia exported 14,204,000 tons of fresh yellow bananas worth around 68,562,793 US dollars during the first half of 2020. In the first half of last year, Cambodia exported 15,540,000 tons worth 59,336,854 US dollars. Speaking during the recent visit to Longmeat Agriculture Company Limited, Yellow Banana Farm in Kampot Province, Commerce Minister Pan Sorasak expressed his appreciation to all Cambodian farmers for continuously doing their best to support demand for agricultural produce in the local and international markets and assisting national economic growth despite the threat of the COVID-19. He also advised the farmers and commodity exporters to adhere to regulations, including maintaining hygiene, not using the chemicals which harm the health of the consumers, to preserve the quality of their produce and long-term growth of the country's export volume. Sorasak also said that maintaining the high quality of the products will ensure the sustainability of the Cambodian market and also the job opportunities for the people. Longmeat Agricultural Company Limited is a joint venture investment between Cambodia and China that grows yellow bananas on 4,000 hectares in the province of Chuhok District. Meanwhile, the cash transfer program for the poor and vulnerable household during the COVID-19 is now at 94%. Minister of Social Affairs and Veterans and Youth Rehabilitation, H.E. Bong Saut, called on local authorities to inform the remaining household to get the cash support as soon as possible before the first round, which lasts for 1 month, comes to an end on July 24, 2020. According to the minister, the second round will begin on July 25 and last until August 24. The cash transfer program for the poor and vulnerable household during COVID-19 was officially launched on June 24, 2020. The afford unloading economic burden of about 560,000 households. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much, Meldy, for joining us today. We look forward for more news from Cambodia and from you. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, Alma reporting live from Phnom Penh, Cambodia. This is Meldy Mahinay. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Meldy. Over in Thailand, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has expressed worries about the youth as pro-democracy protesters held their rallies and other displays of dissent across the kingdom. Joining us live and to tell us more is Faye Barte. Hello, Faye.
Good afternoon, Alma, and good afternoon to all the viewers. Can you hear me clearly?
I can.
Because, yeah. Okay, thank you. Because I'm still outside. In line with the protest that happened last Saturday, Thailand's premier said he was worried about a burgeoning student movement calling for the dissolution of his government, as pro-democracy protesters plot rallies and other creative displays of dissent across the kingdom. His comments come days after thousands of mostly young black-clad protesters amazed at Bangkok's Democracy Monument in one of the city's largest shows of defiance in years, shouting vitriolic chants directed at the pro-military establishment. The students displayed an organizational savvy inspired by pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, and more than a dozen rallies are planned across the country in coming week. And um, he said he understands. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, a former army chief, on Tuesday defended keeping emergency laws in place in Thailand, denying that the restrictions are being used to stifle freedoms, as some critics have said. He said also he understands the youths, but at the same time, he said he is also worried for their parents. Thailand politics has long defined by often deadly street protests and coups, with a punch-happy army stepping in to press the reset button whenever dissent resembles to a fever pitch. But an unprecedented pandemic has launched the kingdom's economy into a free fall, and anger is boiling against Prayut and his administration stacked with military and royalist allies. Thailand has had student-led pro-democracy movements in the past, which have at times drawn deadly force from the military. Saturday's protest at Democracy Monument Alma displayed the deep well of discontent among young Thai nationals as the students shouted for Prayut to step down. They also called for the abolition of Thailand's strict royal defamation law, which protects the monarchy and the unassailable King Maha Vajiralongkorn from criticism. And aside from that, we also have some updates about the foreigners, about visas here. The foreign immigration here decided or implemented for the foreigners to have visa amnesty extension from August 1 to September 26. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much for your updates there. Looking forward for the developments out of Thailand. Thank you very much, Faye. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much also, Alma. Stay safe. This is Faye Barta reporting live from Bank of Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Tatawagin ko na ang 5 contestants na papasok sa finals.
Nasa inyong mga kamay ang kanilang kapalaran at 100% ng desisyon ay manggagaling sa inyong boto. Kaya vote na sa pinakamagaling na contestant. Kung ikaw ay Team Angel Nicole Francisco, text TNG Space Angel. Sa palagay mo, Cosmic Angels ang pinakamagaling. Text TNG Space Cosmic. Kung power duo ang nagpahanga sa mahanga ka ni Jonah Chris Pandillo. Text TNG space Jonah Chris. One at the best ba para sa'yo si Edrain Oclarino? Text TNG space Edrain. Boto na at isend sa 0922-110-1400. Isang boto kada isang mobile number. Make sure na tama ang keyword para valid ang boto mo. Pwede rin kayong bumoto via online. Pumunta lang sa Tagisan ng Galing channel sa YouTube. Hanapin ang performance ng paborito niyong contestant. Panuurin, i-like at i-share. 25% ang text votes, 25% ang views, 25% ang like at 25% ang share. Kaya naman lahat ng boto, views, like at shares nyo ay mahalaga. So vote now! At sabay-sabay nating abangan kung sino ang tatanghaling ultimate grand winner sa Tagisan ng Galing!
Malaking parte ng pamumuhay namin ang agrikultura. Sa mother side ko, ang kanilang kalakal ay animal husbandry. Sila po ay nag-aalaga ng mga baka. Magmula po sa Pangasinan, napunta po ng Nueva Ecija. Ang father side ko naman po, mula po sa Spain, pagdating nila dito sa Pilipinas, sila po yung tinatawag na uring may lupa. Talagang nabuhay po kami. Ibinuhay po sa amin ang agrikultura. Mga mahal kong kababayan, ito po si Robin Padilla. Inaanyayahan ko po kayong manood ng Unlad, Kaagapay sa Hanap Buhay. Dito po sa Net 25.
May kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Welcome back. The Philippines is set to repatriate the third batch of the remains of 57 more overseas Filipino workers from Saudi Arabia next week, according to the Department of Labor and Employment. DOLE Secretary Silvestre Bello said the chartered Philippine Airlines cargo flight will arrive in Manila on July 28. Preliminary figures from DOLE offices and the Philippine Embassy in Riyadh showed that all of the 57 OFWs died of COVID-19. According to DOLE, 30 bodies of the OFWs will come from Jeddah, 20 from Riyadh, and 7 from Al Khobar. The DOLE, as well as the Interagency Committee, spearheaded the repatriation, bringing home a total of 137 OFWs who succumbed to COVID-19 and other causes. Bello said the homecoming of the remains will follow the same health protocols observed in the first two batches of repatriation, where COVID-19 victims were brought directly to crematoriums upon arrival. The first batch of OFW remains, 49, had been brought home last July 10, while the second batch arrived on July 19. Government officials have welcomed and honored the dead OFWs upon their arrival in the country. Meanwhile, the number of police officers who contracted the coronavirus disease has reached 1,600. As of Tuesday night, the Philippine National Police Health Service reported 36 more COVID-19 cases among its ranks. A total of 610 personnel have recovered from the disease, while the death toll stands at 9. The PNP Health Service is also monitoring 727 probable cases and 1,767 suspected cases. The majority of cops who have contracted COVID-19 are asymptomatic. If a cop tests positive, he or she will observe a 14-day quarantine and undergo another test. Once cleared, they have to rest for 7 to 10 more days before going back to duty. The infected cops came from those who are manning quarantine checkpoints. In other news, police in Indonesia have charged 3 recruiting agency bosses over the tortured death of an Indonesian crew member found in a freezer aboard a Chinese fishing vessel, according to an official. It comes a week after a Chinese supervisor on the Luwangwan Yu 118 was charged with killing 20-year-old Hassan Apriyadi and assaulting other Indonesian crew working on the ship. The recruiters ran 2 agencies that hired Apriyadi and at least 9 others to work on the Chinese boat. The 3 suspects have been detained and charged under human trafficking laws, according to National Police spokesman Awi Setiono, adding that a search was underway for 2 other senior company officials still at large. The trio also faced charges that they knowingly put the crew members at risk. Anti-trafficking experts say the fishing industry is riddled with forced labor, and exploited workers can face non-payment, overwork, violence, and even death. Southeast Asia is a major source of such labor, and unscrupulous recruiters target the poor and uneducated with promises of good wages at sea. Earlier this month, police said they intercepted 2 Argentina-bound Chinese boats in the Malacca Strait, which separates Indonesia and Malaysia, after receiving information that a crew member had died aboard one of the vessels. They later found Apriyadi's frozen body aboard the Luwangwan Yu 118. After interrogating dozens of crew members from China, Indonesia, and the Philippines, police charged Chinese national Song Chuan-yun with the killing. Citing witness statements, authorities also said Song had forced the victim to work despite being ill. He later allegedly tortured the Indonesian and denied him food or water for several days before he died in late June. Song will be tried in Indonesia, while the other crew members have since been released into the custody of their respective embassies, according to Riau Province Police spokesman Harry Goldenheart. A group of Rohingya who survived a perilous sea voyage to Malaysia are said to be caned for entering the country illegally, according to activists on Tuesday, decrying the barbaric sentence. Hundreds of thousands of Muslim Rohingya have fled persecution and violence in mostly Buddhist Myanmar in recent years, with some heading to neighboring Bangladesh and others by sea to Malaysia. But since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries, which traditionally allowed Rohingya boats to land, have been blocking them over fears the migrants could be infected with COVID-19. A boat carrying 202 Rohingya made it to shore in northwest Malaysia in April, but at least 20 men from that group had now been sentenced to jail terms and caning, according to Amnesty International. These Rohingya have received or have escaped Myanmar, but traded one nightmare for another, according to the group's Malaysia researcher, Rachel Cho Howard. Caning is a barbaric practice that amounts to torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, and Malaysia must abolish the use of such a punishment. She said the caning will not deter Rohingya from fleeing to Malaysia, risking their lives at sea. Malay language newspaper Sinar Harajan reported last month that a magistrate's court on Langkawi Island, where the migrants came ashore, sentenced a group of Rohingya men to 7 months jail and 3 strokes of the cane. And they were among a group of 54 Rohingya, including women and children, charged under immigration laws for illegally entering the country. Authorities did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi will run again for this year's November's election. The Nobel laureate ushered her National League for Democracy, or NLD, to a landslide victory back in 2015 after 5 decades of military rule. A political prisoner once hailed as a moral icon by Western governments, Suu Kyi's image has been tarnished by a brutal military crackdown in Myanmar's west that forced around 750,000 stateless Rohingya Muslims to flee into neighboring Bangladesh. She personally appeared at an international tribunal in The Hague to defend the army against allegations of rape, arson, and mass killing in the campaign, which rights groups have said was tantamount to genocide. Her promises of a soaring economy after her party's election have largely failed to materialize, while some ethnic minority groups say their concerns have gone unheard by her government. But Mother Sue, as she is referred to by much of the country's public, remains a widely loved figure within Myanmar. On a Malaysian island beach of the eastern state of Terengganu, where thousands of turtle eggs lay, a band of researchers worked day and night to record the comings and goings of the country's endangered turtles, as the species' eggs continue to be bought from markets on the mainland. Take a look.
Penyu ni binatang yang unik. Jadi kalau kita tak jaga, memang macam next generation memang tak boleh tengok. Benda yang semakin mengacau kepupusan macam tu.
Bahawa hasil daripada dahulu pemerdagangan telur penyu ini, kita sudah hampir kehilangan 3 spesies. Dan kita hanya tinggal 1 spesies sahaja, dan ini yang kita risaukan. Apabila kuasa membeli ini semakin hari semakin bertambah.
Ambil dua-dua dulu. Lepas tu kita tabung ni. Mau ambil banyak mana mau boleh.
Towering Transformers, life-size Marvel superheroes, and extraterrestrial life forms. A house of steel robots in Thailand has made a name for itself by transforming scrap metal into dazzling sculptures inspired by Hollywood blockbusters. Ban Hun Lek, an hour's drive north of Bangkok, has become a popular weekend spot for families eager for Instagram selfies against a backdrop that looks plucked from the silver screen. Visitors to Pairoti Tanam Wong's building workshop gaze up at 8-meter-high or 26-feet sculptures modeled after the robots of the Transformers franchise and a jet black King Kong hewn together from old car parts. Now, Pairoti opened his welding workshop 20 years ago and eventually converted its front section into a gallery for curious tourists. It was just a hobby at first, he tells AFP. When I was a child, I liked mechanics a lot, so I made what I liked into my work, he said. Every sculpture is built using scrap metal and recyclables, which makes each creation unique, he said. A 1-meter-high piece sells for up to 30,000 baht or $950, and the majority of his customers are overseas buyers. And since the coronavirus pandemic spread around the world and sent the global economy into a tailspin, Hairodi says his art exports have been put on pause. Still, the towering metal brontosaurus at Banhan Lek, which can be seen from the main freeway, draws dozens of Thai visitors each weekend. And lastly, we take you to Canada as our EBC sports correspondent Anthony Sevilla had an exclusive interview with former PBA import for the NLEX Road Warriors, Olu Oshalu. Take a look.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Sevilla for Eagle News, and joining me from his home in Toronto is former PBA import for the NLEX Road Warriors and the most recent signee for the Fraser Valley Bandits, Olu Oshalu. How's it going, Olu?
Good, man. Can't complain. Can't complain at all, man.
When's the last time you were able to pick up a basketball?
It was 3 months, like 3 months of just cardio, resistance band workouts. Just I at a point I didn't feel like a basketball player anymore. So I wasn't shooting, I wasn't touching the basketball, I wasn't dribbling. I was just trying to just keep in shape, in some kind of shape. So yeah, it was like a 3-month gap between actually doing something basketball focused.
How was your experience playing for the NLEX Road Warriors?
I enjoyed it, man. I really enjoyed the love, the Filipino love for basketball is something I've never seen anywhere before. So it was definitely something I definitely appreciated and got used to and got accustomed to.
Is there anything when you got to the Philippines that surprised you?
Traffic. I heard, there's gonna be a lot of traffic, man, a lot of cars. I'm like, oh yeah, cool, whatever. The people, yeah, man, I don't know. They got a lot of patience. There's no road rage because you're not going anywhere.
So there's a lot of talk about Coach Yang, and he was your coach at NLEX. Can you talk about the experience that you had with him being under his wing?
Man of very few words in practice. Come game time, it's a whole different individual. Complete different individual. He's loud, he's aggressive, he's in your face. No, I got a lot of respect for him as a competitor, man. He can coach. You know, he's been successful for years, so there's a reason why he's still doing what he's doing.
So we know that you spent some time in the Philippines, but obviously you weren't there training the whole time. Can you talk about your experiences outside of basketball in the Philippines?
I'm the guy who likes to kind of like get out and mingle with the people. So, you know, if I could, I'd rather go do my grocery shopping at the local markets as opposed to just going to the grocery store. So I found a few markets where I get like my vegetables, my fruits and whatnot.
Were you able to try the Filipino cuisine when you were there?
I definitely was.
All right, balut.
Absolutely not. My coach, so one of my assistant coaches, he's one of the top 50 best PBA players, Coach Jolas. He almost, like, he's literally had it, was peeling the egg, and like, oh, you gotta try it. And my whole team, Austin and whatnot, are trying to peer pressure me into doing it. I did not cave, I did not break. Doesn't look appetizing to me whatsoever, so no balut for me.
Coconut buko juice.
Best. The best. Absolute best. 2 thumbs up.
Is there anything that you'd like to say to Filipino fans watching this?
Man, I really hope you guys get, to enjoy the PBA once again. I miss you guys. Miss the Philippines. Looking forward to coming back one day. Guys got like a real love for basketball, man. One thing I really appreciate is the people there. Like, they really have an affinity for basketball, and as a player, I love it.
That was Olu Oshalu, former NLEX Road Warrior in the Philippine Basketball Association. You can see Olu and the Fraser Valley Bandits compete in this year's CEBL Summer Series in St. Catharines, Ontario, when they take on the Edmonton Stingers. In Vancouver, Anthony Sevilla, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Anthony. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the region. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting